On the side part of that, what I really learned was that as a part of the consulting, coaching was something that I was naturally gifted at as well. To be able to work with the executives on the team, influence them in their leadership style, and teach them some of the communication techniques, leadership techniques that in a world of change that a consultant is looking to go forward, the leaders have got to make change in their own style as well. So I found that to be very rewarding. And ultimately where it led to me starting my own company was primarily focused in that coaching space of inspiring, encouraging, and equipping leaders, ultimately to be the leader that they were called to be.
I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today, I'm here with John. John's the founder and CEO of Growing Champions Coaching and Consulting Company. John has consulted and coached dozens of renowned companies and their leaders across the globe. So, John, as I mentioned, I mean, very impressive bio here, but what I want to do is let people hear it in your words and your story. But before we do that, thank you for taking time out to be on the show today. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and chat with me, and hopefully we'll provide some value to the audience. So thanks for being here today.
I do the same as well, Jason. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah. Well, let's start with your background, your story. Tell us about yourself and kind of what got you to where you are today.
Yeah, great question. I mean, and even if I start out, again, the traditional bio stuff in terms of coaching and consulting, I started Growing Champions just 5 years ago. Prior to that, I was kind of a long-term, if you will, company man for the most part. I'm a mechanical engineer by studying. I spent a good deal of my time cutting my teeth in manufacturing and moving up in leadership roles inside of manufacturing companies of various sizes, and ultimately ended up leading a company in the Midwest back in the year 2000 through about 2006. And at that point in time in the Midwest, and I talked about this a little bit before, it's a little bit colder, much like it was in Massachusetts where you're from. It's a little bit colder in the Midwest than it is in Virginia, where my wife was from. And we decided to make our way back toward the East Coast and toward a warmer climate. And so I got into real estate for about 5 years. And ultimately, in a search to get back into operations and manufacturing after the real estate tank back in 2008, I found myself getting into consulting in healthcare, utilizing the tools I'd been trained in manufacturing, the Toyota production system or lean for a long time. And I had a couple of friends from previous life in manufacturing who said, why don't you do consulting? Dude, I got like no desire to do the life of a consultant. I knew what that was kind of like. And they called me back a few times. And the third time they said, well, we want you to do it in hospitals and clinics. And I just found that fascinating to ultimately see how I might be able to have an impact on the healthcare system in the U.S. And so I started coaching executives at healthcare systems, one in Boston, Massachusetts, actually, helping them to improve the flow of their patients through their system and their patient experience. And I said I'd do that for a couple of years, and now here we are 15 years later, 10 years of that with IBM, and then the last 5 years post-COVID as Growing Champions when I started my own company. So love what I do, and I thought it would be just a couple of years, and I've come to realize that making an impact in that space, and frankly, doing that as an entrepreneur has been much more enjoyable than I thought it would be early on.
Yeah. It's when people say they're a consultant, and I know that this is like a common thing in the business world, especially, large business. You said you were reluctant at first to kind of live that life. Tell us a little bit about like what made you reluctant, and then obviously you went ahead with it and have launched it into entrepreneurialism. So what made you reluctant initially to kind of pursue that path?
Yeah, interestingly, it wasn't really the work as much as it was the side part of it, the travel in airplanes, the hotel rooms, multiple nights a month. And I had when I had left manufacturing in 2006, it was ultimately, one, because of the location that we were in, but more importantly, my kids were young at that point in time. They were 7 and 5. And I was starting in manufacturing, I was starting to have to do more international travel. And that was getting very difficult for my wife in terms of, ultimately her almost behaving as a single mother a number of nights that I was traveling. And I sensed that if I got into consulting inside of that space, that it was going to become something very similar. And, I set some pretty clear boundaries at the start when I did get into consulting that I couldn't be out of my own, in essence, it was actually a key performance indicator that I had, but I couldn't be in a hotel bed more than 12 nights a month, more than 40% of the time, because I knew then it would start to get a little bit difficult. So the company I work with kind of made that work for the most part. I was able to work 2 weeks a month out of my home office as well. And there were days, there were months where I had to travel a little bit more, but that was probably the primary fear in terms of getting into something like that, was just the lifestyle that brought along with it. Now, even in the consulting space, in terms of how we were trained by the true Japanese consultants, there was a level of behavior that they really pushed folks in their consulting, and that wasn't the style that I liked as well, whether it came across as rude or direct. One of the things in the leadership world, when you're running a company and you're making decisions to make change, generally the team is going to go forward with some of those changes. In the consulting world, nobody really has to do anything that you talk about. And so that can be kind of frustrating. You rely on your influence, you rely on your knowledge and your stories to make that actually happen. So funny, when I went into healthcare doing this in hospitals and clinics, one of the things they said was, John, all your stories are from manufacturing and we need you to get some healthcare stories. I'm like, I will. I'm working with you to get those healthcare stories. Yeah. As it went along in the journey, and about 5 years into my journey with that company, I started to go back and do some consulting in manufacturing companies. And the manufacturing companies are saying, John, all your stories are in healthcare. We don't want to hear about healthcare. We want to hear about manufacturing. So it creates quite a balance, quite a dichotomy as well. And I often refer to really the life of a consultant, if you will, as that type of an enigma. You want them to kind of hate you by the end of the week because you're pushing them and you're taking them to a place they wouldn't go on their own. But they love to see you when you come back the next time, whether it's 2 weeks later or a month later, because they know they're going to learn something. On the side part of that, what I really learned was that as a part of the consulting, coaching was something that I was naturally gifted at as well. To be able to work with the executives on the team, influence them in their leadership style, and teach them some of the communication techniques, leadership techniques that in a world of change that a consultant is looking to go forward, the leaders have got to make change in their own style as well. So I found that to be very rewarding. And ultimately, where it led to me starting my own company was primarily focused in that coaching space of inspiring, courage, and equipping leaders, ultimately to be the leader that they were called to be. And I just so happened to get a chance to do some consulting because I love the Toyota production system. It's how I'm wired.
That's very cool. So the travel sounds like was one of the big, just being away from family, which makes total sense. When you decided to start your own company, would you talk a little bit about kind of that transition? I think sometimes, people are nervous to take that leap. And here I've had this career, I've been doing this, it sounds like, for a decade, and then you want to go out on your own. How did that transition go for you? What was it like in those days?
Great question. While I was evaluating that, if you will, if I look back on that today, so I've been on my own for 5 years as an entrepreneur. And as I look at it today, as I sit in this chair, I said, why didn't I do this 15 years ago in terms of getting started? But there was a level of concern, no doubt about it. There was a level of comfort working for an organization and doing those things, having the healthcare provided to you and the steady salary that comes along with it, ultimately led me to probably hesitate a little bit more. It wasn't necessarily in my genetics, if you will, to be entrepreneurial by spirit. And, frankly, I take it as a sign, but ultimately in 2020, when COVID hit and we're working in hospitals and clinics, we couldn't get back into those hospitals and clinics anymore. They were not allowing folks to come back in. And our business model that I was working within, the company I was working for, wasn't able to shift fast enough to make that happen. So ultimately, I was let go from that organization in reductions. And so that gave me a little bit of an on-ramp to decide whether or not I was going to get started. I had seen that coming a little bit, so I had started my own LLC, and I actually started to coach, on the side with a couple other individuals that were previous clients of us in the organization, just to test out that coaching model that worked. But, the way the on-ramp worked, the way the severance package worked, the day I started consulting for my first on-site consulting work as an entrepreneur was literally the day after my severance had run out with the organization that I was with. And I look at that, going back in time now, and I think there's a lot of uncertainty in that space in terms of how you have to, continuously be the sales force You've also got to be the back office function in terms of invoicing and finance and all those things. And you got to be the face of the organization, building thought leadership and being in front of the client and making the work happen. And so while I knew that was going to be a challenge, I've actually relished in that. And I appreciate what I would say is the freedom of being able to choose who I work with as well as when I work with them also. And again, I think if you look at even how I got started in the business on my own, it was primarily through relationships that I had built in the past 25 to 30 years with others who afforded me the opportunity to either A, come in and coach them, teach them a new methodology, or refer me to others who they knew needed that as well. So that was a big, if you will, momentum boost at the start also.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting, the piece about you would have started 15 years earlier. And I think there's a lot to that decision-making process, because I think that it's easy to kind of look back and say, oh, I wish I started this before. But sure, at the same time, the experiences that you had, the network that you had built, I think all of our past adds up to sort of contribute to some of the success. I think if you are maybe someone who had just graduated from college and they say, oh, I'm going to start my own consulting business, it's probably hard to get started in that business, harder than someone who's got, extensive experience like yourself. And so there's pros and cons, but I think you mentioned the word freedom, and it's, yes, you do have to, you either have to hire someone or you're doing the invoicing, or you're doing kind of all that stuff.
Right.
That in the corporate world gets taken care of for you. But at the same time, it really is just this kind of incredible freedom that happens and I experienced it too when I went to, from having a W-2 job to being entirely self-employed. And it's like, there's some really scary things about it. But at the same time, when my kids are off from school, or, we decide we want to do something, I don't have to ask anybody. I don't have to clear it with anyone. I can structure my schedule around the other things that are important. And so it's like, I think that is really ultimately, it's almost like a continuation of your initial concern of, I don't want to be gone from family. I don't want to travel so much, per week or per month. But then going that extra step into entrepreneurship, you really can fully dictate that, right? You don't have to say, oh, I want it to be 12 days a month. And now, hey, they want me to go a couple extra days. Do I give in? Is it worth fighting? It's just like, this is what I do what I want to do now. And you mentioned, you work with the clients that you want to work with. And I think that just creates a much, more likable, more exciting.
And common leaders. Hope you're enjoying the episode so far. I believe in doing business with people you like and trust, and not just a company name. That's why a strong personal brand is essential, whether you're an entrepreneur or a leader within a company. Brand Builders Group, the folks who have been helping me refine my own personal brand, are offering a free consultation call with one of their expert brand strategists. They'll help you identify your uniqueness, craft a compelling story, and develop a step-by-step plan to elevate your impact. So head on over to coachjohngallagher.com/BBG, as in Brand Builders Group, to schedule your free call and take the first step toward building a personal brand that gets you noticed for all the right reasons. That's coachjohngallagher.com/BBG. Now, let's get back to the episode.
In that instance, there's stressors that go along with that freedom, but still, I completely resonate with what you're saying about that, sort of what that created for you, kind of once you took those steps.
Yeah, the word that comes to mind as you kind of stretch through this, fulfilled. I just felt more fulfilled inside of that, being able to work with those individuals. And you touched on a little bit, that doesn't take the place of the discipline required to make those things happen. There's no doubt about it. There's nobody there also to make sure you came to work. You're the one that's got to make sure you show up on a daily basis, and your folks will know. And the other thing, I think that was, you're spot on. Coming out of college, there are many organizations that actually hire people right out of college to be consultants, but they tend to be more in that analytic side. And the way that I see the value in what I'm able to provide now over those years of experience are those stories, those experiences, frankly, those failures of what didn't work almost as much as what did work, and helping folks to avoid some of those things. And again, I just find it to be more rewarding from that standpoint. I think about this. People change in terms of change management. I often say this: people change when the displeasure of, remaining the same where they are today is greater than the discomfort of the change itself. And I relate that back almost to that entrepreneurial leap, if you will. Some folks will leap earlier because they're just sick and tired of the status quo and what they're doing, and they can handle the discomfort of how hard it's going to be to get started and getting your own healthcare insurance and doing all those things that go along with that. I still, it took me a while to get that discomfort. And again, I'm glad they kind of pushed me off the edge, so to speak, to get it started.
Yeah. And I've talked to a number of people on the podcast that have had essentially that same, motivation, if you will, to become an entrepreneur, and that they got laid off from a job, something, whether it was COVID related or otherwise. They're just, people said, and maybe have that in the back of your mind somewhere along the way. And then it's like, oh, now I got to do it. And it's interesting because the job market is good, but at the same time, I think not always easy to just go out and find a job that you like and can be happy and fulfilled in. And so, maybe that does indicate, hey, entrepreneurship might be the right way for me to go. Like there's going to be
time to make that change, right?
Right. You got to make a change. There's going to be some struggle no matter what you do. And maybe that's it. But I think one of the things that I feel like gets really kind of sometimes pushed at least in the social media world is leaving your W-2 job is like, that's the greatest accomplishment that you can have. But it's really, I think, recognizing the value of that W-2 job and, sort of utilizing it to build relationships, have those stories that you talked about, have health insurance, like kind of all that other stuff that goes along with it until you feel ready to kind of step out on your own. So it's I think something maybe gets rushed sometimes. But
yeah, I often encourage clients when I chat with them and I'm coaching them on a regular basis and they're considering a job change. It's not always that they're considering going into the entrepreneurial world. They might be considering moving into a different department in their same organization or going to a different organization. But oftentimes what I encourage them to do is to make sure, you're not running from something, but you're running to something. In the space of that entrepreneurial world, what it can be really valuable is there's three components that fit in really nice. I've got a passion for the type of work that I'm going to be doing. There's a market for it or a need, so I can actually get paid for it, and I'm good at it. Okay, those three things. I look back into 2019, even before I was looking to sick, as I saw some of the things changing in the industry, getting back into operations. As folks were telling me in the interview process, I was interviewing for jobs that I was definitely qualified for and should have been getting an offer. But I hadn't realized how I had even changed in my approach. They'd say, I'd hire you as my coach or as my consultant, but I just don't think you fit really well inside of this operations role. And it's in there. And after about three of those no's, those doors being closed in my face, I frankly went to prayer and said, God, are you telling me that you got me exactly where you want me to be in terms of in this consulting and teaching, and just make the best of it where I am right now and not run from an organization in terms of what was happening. And again, each one of those things, as I've listened through that, as I prayerfully consider some of those things, most of the time it ends up being something that ended up being much more valuable for me than where I was.
Yeah, I really like the way you put that. Being either forced or just, really wanting a change is much better to be, sort of, as you said, running to something instead of, because I think a lot of times when people try to just escape, then they take kind of whatever and might end up in exactly the same, kind of negative situations that they were in the first place. And
absolutely,
this could be job.
What's the same? There's so many different sayings. Folks will say the grass is always greener on the other side. Well, the grass is greener where you water it. And ultimately that's where you're going to succeed. So where you are at that point in time, do the best work that you can do until you can find that overlap of those three circles. And when you can really, and that's what I really felt ultimately happened for me. There was a need for the coaching. I was really passionate about leadership development and continuous improvement. And I was pretty good at it. People were even telling me that I was pretty good at it. So it wasn't an ego, but it was just something that I developed as a strength over 25 years. It's worked out pretty well.
Yeah, that's great. Do you, in terms of coaching, are you still working with organizations at scale? Are you coaching, kind of individuals? What's your maybe both? Like what's the structure of your business?
It is both. I said the primary model that I have right now in terms of revenue generating model are smaller businesses, not entrepreneurs, although I do work with entrepreneurs and do one-on-one coaching, but smaller businesses in the 50 to 500 employees, if you will, somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to $250 million in revenue in terms of that sweet spot. And I do consulting with them where I'll go on site and look at some of their key processes. They might be back office processes such as finance or HR or IT that aren't operating that well, or on the front end with regards to sales and marketing and business development, or even in essence where the value is created in the manufacturing side, and utilize the Toyota production system to help them eliminate non-value added or wasteful activities in their processes that they have been performing year over year. They're generally organizations that are making money, but they're just not quite satisfied with where they are. They want to grow even more. And then as a result, because of the change management that's required, I will usually coach the top executive of that organization, the CEO, and the individuals on his leadership team one-on-one. So I could be coaching anywhere from 6 to 15 of their executives one-on-one through remote coaching, developing different systems and processes for them to improve their leadership skills that are going to be required to implement some of the change they're looking to do when I'm there consulting with them. So it works out pretty good. But there are others that I work with individuals, one-on-one coaching as well. So I would say the primary model, though, business to business, and working on both sides.
I'm glad you defined what you consider a small business, because I think a lot of people probably wouldn't put those numbers in a small business category. But I understand if you're
sure.
Looking at it from the scale of all businesses and what you've worked in the past. I think it's
where I've come from those big public organizations, Eaton
right.
Corporation, Mitsubishi, and all those. Yeah, they tend to be small businesses. Absolutely. I mean, look at that. They tend to be 25 years ago. They were entrepreneurs. They bootstrapped this thing from the start, and they've got systems and processes in place that have been there for 25 years, and they don't even realize how inefficient they are. That's the toughest part of the culture change as well, is going in there and telling some executive that, yeah, you did good to get it where you are today. But if you want to truly have success, and sometimes working with Christian organizations, Kingdom Impact, you're going to have to change. And I think there's a quote that floats around says, if things are going to remain the same, productive, profitable, growing, then things are going to have to change. And it's just something that really try to get through to them, because they'd love to have it stay the same way if they could. Yeah.
You said culture, and that's actually one of the things I wanted to kind of talk about, because I think, you mentioned companies hire new college grads as consultants, which to me sounds pretty, counterintuitive, but you're saying at an analytical level, that's maybe helpful. But I would imagine that these culture changes that need to happen might actually be at least as important as kind of the analytics behind it, as if not more. I would think more, but realistically, that's where that kind of experience and the stories and the within multiple industries, that's where that really becomes, I think, a superpower and allows you to provide a service that the new college grads won't have. They might be good with numbers, but it's not just as simple as being good at numbers. And I think that's how much of what you do you feel like is more of that culture, whether it's change or reinforcing or addressing things on that level versus your pure analytics, KPIs, and numbers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think, even with the analytics, most of those, again, small to mid-sized organizations are not used to tracking metrics at the level I teach them to track them. Ultimately, they're SMART objectives by month, SMART being measurable. They're time-based. They're difficult to accomplish. They won't set big goals unless you really try to push them. And that's where that analytics comes in, to look at the history. But, in terms of saying like there might be a mix of the change management, when I teach this from a lean standpoint, my teachers who taught me the Toyota production system, there's two components. There's continuous improvement, which has to do with the analytics, which has to do with the methodology and the 7 steps that go into it. And teaching about 8 waste or teaching about standard work, frankly, is very easy and a lot of what someone out of college can do. But it's the respect for people component that comes into play. And you got to have both continuous improvement and respect for people. If you're going to go into an organization and look to make change via numbers, yet you don't have an employee engagement process that keeps them involved in the system, at least how I've taught it, it won't be sustainable over the long term. You'll do something while I'm there as a consultant teaching you to make change. But when I walk away, I often refer to as kind of this ball rolling up the hill, and you roll the ball up the hill and you make some success, but you get distracted and you're like, okay, we did that. We don't do the change management component to keep the things in place. I walk away from the ball and what happens? It rolls back down the hill again. And sometimes it rolls back further than even when you started. So I would say that while the effort on the front end has the feel of 50-50 in terms of process and culture, I think it's probably more like 75-25 in terms of culture when you really start to get it moving so that it becomes part of who you are as an organization, developing the core values and the behaviors associated with those values.
Environment in that instance, like, yeah, there's stressors that go along with that freedom, but still, I completely resonate with what you're saying about that, sort of what that created for you, kind of once you took those steps.
Yeah, the word that comes to mind as you kind of stretch through this, fulfilled. I just felt more fulfilled inside of that, being able to work with those individuals. And you touched on a little bit, that doesn't take the place of the discipline required to make those things happen. There's no doubt about it. There's nobody there also to make sure you came to work. You're the one that's got to make sure you show up on a daily basis, and your folks will know. And the other thing I think that was you're spot on. Coming out of college, there are many organizations that actually hire people right out of college to be consultants, but they tend to be more in that analytic side. And the way that I see the value in what I'm able to provide now over those years of experience are those stories, those experiences, frankly, those failures of what didn't work almost as much as what did work, and helping folks to avoid some of those things. And again, I just find it to be more rewarding from that standpoint. I think about this. People change in terms of change management. I often say this: people change when the displeasure of remaining the same where they are today is greater than the discomfort of the change itself. And I relate that back almost to that entrepreneurial leap, if you will. Some folks will leap earlier because they're just sick and tired of the status quo and what they're doing, and they can handle the discomfort of how hard it's going to be to get started and getting your own healthcare insurance and doing all those things that go along with that. I still, it took.
Uncommon Leader, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did with Dr. Jason Balara, episode 421 on his podcast. If that inspired you, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button right now so that you can share this with others so that they can find more and more equipping content, helping them to grow and be the leaders they are called to be. Be sure to follow me and Jason on social media. We share content all the time that's designed to equip you to be a better leader. And if you like this conversation, you'll love the conversations I have on the Uncommon Leader podcast with other uncommon leaders like you, ones who are looking to grow in their leadership, grow others, and ultimately have the impact that they want to have on a daily basis. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so that you can get it automatically in your email each week, and you'll know and you'll be able to listen to some great uncommon conversations. Until then, go and grow champions.